Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Delighted to welcome John Murray to come and talk to us about a new initiative that they launched recently to create a fund for the Highlands to build infrastructure in the Highlands, and John will talk a bit more about that. And obviously, he's asking for both Westminster and the Scottish Government to invest in the fund and support as well. There's a bigger story here, isn't there, we discuss about, is about regional tourism, and actually how we need to support regional tourism and the great stories, but how we get local structures correct as well. So John, welcome. Shall we start off with obviously what you launched last week, which obviously got very good exposure?
Yeah, I'm not the leader of this. The leader of this is David Whiteford. He's the chair of North Highland Initiative, but I'm kind of on the sidelines and looking at the North Highlands in terms of tourism and the challenges that it brings. Now I see that Stuart and Trudy are on the call here, and they will have probably in many ways much more background knowledge than I, so they will definitely be people to feed into this discussion. But you know what David, there was a recent meeting with Michael Gove, Jamie Stone, the local MP. He's a Lib Dem, but Michael Gove, who I'm sure you know is Conservative, he came out and they visited a distillery in Ardross, in Easter Ross, and they discussed the potential, or it was proposed to them about potentially a growth deal, and David has followed that up with a letter, as he's included ourselves and a few other businesses, and I'm quite sure chambers, etc., within that the bucket, I guess. But it's really about putting a pitch there to get both governments to consider a growth deal for the North Highlands, and that is really based on infrastructure and facilities to handle the influx of tourists that we have, and we particularly had this year. This year, you know, you've probably all seen it all over social media, all over the media, you know, pros and cons, a lot of vigilante stories too. There was a Facebook group set up, which I think actually backfired to the people that set it up, because they became a bit of a hate campaign within its own right. You know, but in reality, this year we got additional tourists, which was no surprise, because from a central government perspective, Visit Scotland, Tourism Alliance, it was very much the message was, you know, you can't go abroad, don't go abroad, come to the Highlands, you know, staycation, and that's fantastic. But sadly, that the remit to provide the infrastructure lies with the council, and the council have got no money. So there was just a big gap there in terms of being caught off message. Now, the North Coast 500, as we all know, it seems to be quite divisive, is that people that are involved in tourism and may benefit by it are pro it, and a lot of the communities that have got no gain or you know, are not interested in it, and it distracts their daily life, and they're anti it. So it very much, and this is not a new thing. I mean, this, you know, 3 years or so has gone past, but this year it's been really magnified to the issues. The infrastructure has been required since you know, a few years now, and you know, there is a fund, which is the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, RETIF. Communities can apply to that fund. In fact, I think there's about £3 million per year goes into it. But that's down to the communities themselves to apply. I noticed that the latest round of applications do include a number of communities looking for camper van facilities to empty their waste, etc. But if you look at that, Ireland, etc., they've got facilities, and I think it's really it's about now, if we can all just bring it together, map it out, work together. I think COVID has definitely encouraged more collaboration between agencies and organisations and even private companies. And now it's, you know, I think the general feeling is that, you know, the horse has bolted this year. let's now not get too hung up on that. Let's focus on 2021, but getting the funding and good funding, strong funding to put in the infrastructure and map it out is key to the future and ongoing success of this. And you know, the most food and drink, and that's why I've ended up on these calls, is food and drink is my background and my passion, and that's one of my main interests that of course goes into tourism, because food and drink tourism. So there's lots of opportunities, but these opportunities, there has to be the infrastructure there to realise a lot of these opportunities. So I think that kind of sums up. It's work in progress. You know, I don't know if David's quite got a response back yet from both governments with any details, so I can certainly update you on that when that's appropriate. But you know, the next, we're pulling together a meeting. You know, I'm pulling it together, and HIE are going to facilitate along with David, and we're going to get the council, tourism, and a few others involved, just to say that we need to map it out. I feel very strongly about that, is that for tourism in the North Highlands, if I focus on that area, we need to map out what is actually there in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of organisational remit for tourism organisations. So, you know, up in Trudy's area, we've got Venture North, we've got Visit Wester Ross, but in East Sutherland, where I live, we don't have a DMO, and we don't have one on the west coast of Sutherland. Easter Ross hasn't really got something, but when you boil that down to individual villages, then, you know, you get the likes of Dornoch that is doing an amazing job, and, you know, Ballantor and Tane, etc. So they're doing an amazing job. But I think it just needs, the fabric just needs to be stitched together a little bit more, fill in the gaps, and that there is that matching from the national and regional organisations to work with the communities closely to promote tourism and provide infrastructure. I've garbled on for long enough.
Okay, how much funding are you actually looking for, out of interest, John? Can we put a figure around that?
He hasn't put a figure on it yet, no, but I mean, it's not, it wouldn't be in the 3 millions, because that's already there. I think we're looking for, you know, a double digit.
No, that's understandable as much as anything else. So you're probably looking for 10 to 20 million. And actually, is there a plan? Because actually there is a real opportunity here, isn't there, to take the disaster, you know, what's happened in 2020, which has been hard for everybody, and actually create a real positive story going to 2021, isn't it?
That's what I think we're hoping to achieve. You know, but I mean, there'll be a lot of stakeholders involved in that. You know, much more than's involved at the moment. So it is really about bringing everybody with the journey. That's, you know, key to the success of this. But yeah, no, it needs to be a decent number. My personal fear is, and this is just my own personal view, is that, you know, with an election next year, politic games have sort of started already, and when we're working with two governments, maybe it's the perfect time, I don't know, but people in this call might understand that a bit greater than I, but you know, I would hate it to become a political football, if you like.
And from the launch last week, what kind of feedback you had from the press coverage you were getting? Can I ask?
Just through social media, really quite positive, but I haven't got any, as I say, direct feedback, because David would receive that, because
I understand that. Yeah, and but also from the community, the local community in the Highlands, because actually it's interesting what you're saying about the conflict that takes place between the hospitality and the 500, and obviously the communities don't want that. I mean, how's that?
And to be fair to North Coast 500, I mean, I'm pro it. I'm pro it. But so the North Coast 500 had a call a number of weeks back and invited all the local community councils onto that call. That was part of the business club. So they've got a business club. They invited all the community councils round the route onto the call. A number of them attended. There was a decent discussion. And on that call, myself and Scott Morrison from Dunrobin Castle. Now, Dunrobin Castle is local village to I in Golspie, you know, and he's quite involved in tourism. We both put forward the idea to get the MSPs that covered our area to come on the call, hear what's been said. This, bearing in mind, this was pre-opening up, so this was before tourism had opened up, and we asked them would they come along and actually come together as one, a cross-party, to put the message out to communities that, you know, we should welcome tourism, we should, you know, as long as they behave in a responsible manner, etc., and follow the guidelines. And sadly, none of them took up on that request. I personally had a one-to-one, and that was just on my own back, a one-to-one with one of the MSPs, and I emailed another one. One of them committed to putting that cross-party letter together, to which it has never happened. So I'm quite disappointed by that, is that, you know, whilst they are not maybe at the coalface, I think that a consistent letter note from them to the communities and the people that live within it, I think it might have helped a little bit. It wouldn't have stopped the road camping, etc., I guess, but it might have helped a little bit.
No, I can't say. Gary, can I bring you in? Gary Atkinson, can I bring you in at this point? Because I know you've been doing quite a bit in terms of this kind of area as well. What are your thoughts on this?
I just think it's a fabulous opportunity for the Chambers to get behind this with David and Tanya and yourself, John. I mean, I know they've been very, very active recently with the tourism project. So that's why I suggested they join us. And thank you for those chief execs that have come onto the call. I would probably put it over to them, Chris, and see if they feel they can assist in any way.
Okay. Open forum. Any thoughts on this? Gentlemen? Assist. Jane, can I bring you in at this point? Talking from obviously from our girl point of view, because you've obviously had an influx of tourists recently as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Living in Tarbert, certainly this weekend, more than any others, it's just been chock-a-block and great to see. But a bit like what John said, I don't think it's necessarily across the board. I think there's pockets of where that's picked up and pockets of where it's perhaps not. But really excited at what John's talking about in terms of that network opportunity to really put some investment in. I guess my come from, because we know there isn't a lot of cash in pockets just now. I guess I wanted to ask John, what were your thoughts around where that 10 to 20 million would be likely to come from?
I don't know, where do they pluck all their billions and millions out of? Well, it must be in the secret cupboard. I don't know. It seems to be that never-ending gravy tail that we seem to have just gone through, and somebody has to pay it back. So I'm not going to think about that too much, as long as they come up with it.
It's private funding. Is it worth trying to?
No, there's going to be a mix. There's going to be a mix of private investment, and locally to my own local village. I mean, I'm doing something in my local village for Golspie. And again, bringing some stakeholders together. Golspie, you know, we are on the A9, North Coast 500 goes right through us. And as I've spoken about on this call before, is we've got 5 hotels, none of them serve food. You know, it's actually embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. We've got a mountain bike trail, world class. We haven't even got a sign on the road to show people that we even have one. So, you know, we've got lots of facilities, we've got lots of infrastructure that could be utilised, but we're not doing it, right? So I'm bringing that chat together next Thursday with the Local Development Trust, Community Council, HIE, etc., and some business folk within it. And what I'm proposing, and I have spoken to HIE about it, to gain some guidance, is that we set up our own investment club. So there are people that would be, myself included, would be willing to invest in our own village, and that we could buy some of the infrastructure, lease it back out to potential entrants, etc. I think that we need to take some of that in our own hands and put our money where our mouth is and get joint funding, but actually we can commit do some investment ourselves. So I think in terms of the North Highland thing, that would be about putting that out to the wider remit. Now, HIE within that discussion, they mentioned that they're talking to like Aberdeen investment groups, etc. So there are private investors out there that would be willing to invest, and it's just making the right pitch for it.
Peter Seymour, can I bring you in at this point and just ask your thoughts on this as well?
Well, I mean, I think from a property agent's point of view, the North Coast 500 has been a huge success story, and I think it's brought a lot of attention to one of Scotland's strongest selling points. And certainly in terms of hospitality and tourism, you look at the assets that Scotland has, and we're world class. We've got whiskey, we're the home of golf, we've got beautiful scenery, and the North Coast 500 encapsulates that last point. What are people going to want post coronavirus? They're going to want seclusion, intimate, remote locations to go. And I think you're absolutely right. The North Coast 500 needs better infrastructure, better quality establishments around it. With there are some good ones, don't get me wrong, but there are also some big gaps. I can't say any more that we're working with someone that's trying to fill that. At the moment, but we're banging our heads against funding problems in terms
I'd have
of.
thought, again, you're obviously in the heart of it. I'd have thought raising the money isn't huge amounts of money. This is actually a real opportunity for people to invest in this point.
There is, without saying too much, there is private money that is fully supportive, but only on the condition that it's supported by debt. And the banks are not prepared to put the debt into hospitality and leisure right now, and that's I think the big undersight that they've been bitten in 2008, 2009, and now they're running scared from the sector, which it's a real problem. I mean, to give you an example, valuation wise, it was only in 2017 that we saw banks starting to lend for going concern transactions against goodwill, and therefore lend against the full market value of an asset. Pre-2017 they weren't. So for nearly 9 years, the market was struggling to find the equity and the debt to do the full transactions. So we only had 2 really good years before coronavirus really kicked in. And I think that the banks are going back to that position now, and I can see them probably, in future transactions, turning around and saying, what's the closed value? What's it worth? Just as the building, no F&F. And that will never happen. This is an assumed value that, if you're dealing with a reliable operator, they're never going to strip it out and leave themselves without a liquor license, leave themselves without the core assets that make this a hotel or make it a good business. And, there is the old saying, you make an ass, the banks are always lending against assumed values. Well, you make an assumption, what does it make you? And I can understand their risk profile, but the fact they never look at market value and the risk apportionment, how much of that value is attributed to goodwill, what's the risk differential, why aren't we supporting that business? If it's done 5 years of growth, why are we not supporting it? It's unlikely to fail immediately, and certainly not within the term of the loan. So I think, especially with some of the bigger institutions that are Scottish-based being government-backed, I think it's disappointing to hear that they're reluctant to lend to the sector again.
Well, it's going to be important, I think, isn't it? Paul, can I bring you in at this point and just hear your thoughts from your point of view? Hi, Paul.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, well, firstly, apologies for not making the last few meetings a bit frantic round here. I was very interested in everything being said, but particularly from Peter's point of view, I think he's absolutely right in terms of the poor support that good operators have not had over the last few years, and it just adds to the problem of poor infrastructure in areas where tourists are. I noticed that you've, from talking to or listening to John, Highland villages where tourists go, and there are hotels and businesses there that are not offering any food, for example. and it just sends out an entirely wrong message. So we really need to invest in this properly. If we're going to sell Scotland as a major tourist destination outside Edinburgh, etc., we've got to provide the facilities that people need, and that means that these facilities have to be funded properly, and these businesses need the support of the lending bodies. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Peter. It's appalling that a lending business that has been propped up hugely by the UK government for the last 10 years has virtually walked away from hospitality. It's appalling.
I mean, interestingly enough, and very recently, I've started having to be asked the question of analysing other businesses. So I've looked at a smokehouse, I've looked at a butcher's business, and I've looked at other, their returns are single-digit returns. And are you honestly telling me that, if you've got £1 million business that's going to produce a 22-25% net profit, that is more risky than a retail business producing 6 or 7% net profit? Yeah. And yes, it's very easy for an operator to make a big mistake and lose a lot of goodwill and therefore lose a lot of value. But surely there should be some support for a business that can produce these kind of returns.
But isn't there, and maybe I'm just missing the point here, isn't there such a great opportunity at this point in time? Because people won't travel abroad as much, they want a staycation, and the Highlands has such a great story to tell.
Certainly, I think the feeling that I'm getting from my clients and my operators are that the rural businesses are doing really, really well, much better than expected. Certainly if you look at Carl Skew, Tanya's reporting phenomenal levels of turnover and business. But I was also down near Campbelltown, and there was a couple of hotels there, which again reporting great numbers of covers through their pub and their bar, and really good levels of people going out to eat, and that has been encouraging. And I think that the problem we're going to face is that there's also the city centre operators and the brands who have yet to show us exactly, and it's starting to trickle through, how bad it is for them. And the city centre guys, I was on the phone to Star Pubs just literally before this call, and he said, some of his city centre guys have had businesses that have been fantastic for years and generations, have got nothing, and they don't look like they're going to get anything with New Year's being cancelled, with the festival cancelled. They're going to struggle to make it to March next year.
I'd agree with Peter 100% from the information, the figures that we're getting back from our client base. There are pockets that are doing really well, far greater than they'd anticipated, but there are others that are struggling. It is the city centres, I think Peter's absolutely right.
But they're slightly different issues as well, isn't it? Because again, people back to offices, which is going to be a struggle. John?
I just want to throw it out there to the room to see what people's thoughts were towards, I'm slightly concerned we might be in a little bubble at the moment because, well, today the schools have gone back in Scotland, so that's one element. It is kind of back to normal, if you like, and the English schools, well, they go back, we don't know when, but it'll be a few weeks, I guess. But once that's gone back to where are we then? Are we just on the crest of, we've had this amazing few weeks of numbers and tourism and covers and everything. Where are we in say the end of September, October through that? So that's one bit, and then the other bit is in terms of an opportunity, because I think sometimes there is always an opportunity within difficulty. Is that these guys that are struggling in city centres, etc. Is there an opportunity to try and take some of these up to the likes of Golspie, where we've got no F&B, to create an opportunity? How do we, how do I, as leading the village, if you like, how do we get some of them up to say, look, guys, come to Golspie, have a look around, there is an opportunity? Because, I just want to be able to go out and eat and drink in Golspie, and I can't currently do that. And I think that's, for the accommodation providers, it's really embarrassing. The chip shop has even, that was the only place you could go for something to eat. It had a sit-down element beside it, situated right in the main road. he has converted his shop into a sweetie shop. And I'm going, oh my word, we only had one, and now we've got none. So how can we facilitate that opportunity? That's so one. It's about one, are we in the bubble, and is that about to be deflated quite quickly? And two, how do we get the people up to look?
Gary, can I bring you in again?
John, do you know why he converted it into a sweet shop? If there's demand there, why did he change it? Because certainly Tanya, from what we're hearing about Tanya, there's no way she would convert part of her restaurant at the moment into a shop.
I know. Particularly when it's the only one, Gary, you know? It's the only place you can actually sit down to eat on the A9, on the North Coast 500. But anyway, that's his business decision. He can make that himself, you know. But yeah.
But the overall thing, isn't it, is to raise the awareness, the opportunity in the area as well, isn't it? There's much more need for a whole marketing piece, which I know Visit Scotland touch on. But listening to you, isn't it about how the industry itself does promote itself as overall? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Gary, do you agree on that?
I do. I was just thinking back to about 8-10 years ago in Aberdeen. We as a city were trying to get the branded restaurants to come into the city, and one in particular that we were looking to try and attract as a city. This wasn't me, just as a city. Was Mitchell and Butler bringing in Old Bar One.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of work went in from the city. It wasn't as in the council, Jane, it was city generally, trying to talk to various companies to bring the likes of Old Bar One into the city centre. However, in the last probably 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot more private individuals or independents growing in Aberdeen rather than the corporates for restaurants. That's very different for hotels. So
and is there a reason for that? I mean, I'd have thought Aberdeen, look, you know better than I do, I'd have thought Aberdeen was quite a good area for corporates, no? With all the oil companies.
Yeah, well, as we all know, the oil business is up and down like a yo-yo, and that's the main reason why we in Aberdeen we are trying to steer towards tourism, hence the whole Business Improvement District starting the Visit Aberdeenshire DMO. And certainly out with what's going on at the moment, it was working because we certainly were seeing European people coming into Aberdeen that we never saw before. But there's an awful lot of work, as many know, going on in Aberdeen with the various festivals that we're bringing in to change the dynamic away from oil and gas. Not the fact we wanted to get away from oil and gas, but just to try and smooth it out. But I mean, that's been a 10-year program, just trying to do so many different initiatives.
Should we bring Trudy and Stuart in maybe to give a bit of what the flavour is in their areas for food and drink and tourism? Just to, like, what's your thoughts, guys, for the tail end of this year and next? Is it, you know, good, bad, indifferent?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed picture. I mean, we've got a number of hotels that are reliant on business tourism, so obviously the bottom has fallen out of that. But in terms of the Eat Out scheme, we've got other hoteliers that have had a bumper August, and it's going to look like it's going to be better than last year in that respect because of the Eat Out scheme. So I guess the worry is what happens on the 1st of September when that scheme has ended, and are people still going to go out and use the local food and drink venues, or is that going to tail off as we head into the back end of the year? So kind of issues around that. Echo your thoughts, John, about the opinion of the North Coast 500 and the community angst and frustration with some of the visitors. I think we've got a different type of visitor coming around the North Coast 500. I would kind of suggest that maybe some of these people are used to being in places like Ibiza and Spain, at this time of year, and therefore, some of the businesses are saying that staff are getting abuse from drunk, people that are staying, and things that they're not being used to in the past. So that's all come from the the staycation element of it. But yeah, I think we've been caught off unawares this this year. Nobody could have predicted obviously COVID and what's happening, but I think opening up tourism and having a big promotion on staycation, and then we knew that the infrastructure wasn't there. I mean, we've been calling for it for ever since the North Coast 500 was launched. And the first year of that, there was a huge influx of visitors, and obviously the infrastructure wasn't there. So it's nothing new. It's just nobody's reacted to that in terms of.
So, Trudy, can I ask, what do you think is needed?
Well, it needs government effort. I mean, there's been talk about City Region Deal 2. So, there's been conversations about that. Obviously, the City Region Deal 1 should have, probably had a wider effect on some of the regions rather than, I know Stuart's on, rather than just the city. So I think any growth fund for the North Highlands needs to look very carefully at what's needed, and I would suggest maybe not necessarily focus purely on tourism, that there are other things in terms of infrastructure that needs to be looked at, things like transport, getting people in and out of the area easily. We're pushing for a PSO on the Wick Airport, and support for that, because we need to be getting people in and out, and that includes tourists as well as business people. So yeah, obviously governments have had money to slosh around with the COVID. Obviously we're going to probably pay that back at some point through taxpayers, but we need some concentrated effort from governments as to really looking at what is needed across the whole of the country, in terms of making sure that we can get these regions back, economically and growing. Otherwise, we
need to, But I mean, that's the opportunity, isn't it? If we don't invest, we won't maximise the opportunity in simple terms. Is that fair?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I get that probably private money as well, but, government has a role in here to step in, and we need both governments to do that. The UK government have said that they're committed to the whole of the UK. Well, let's see that. There's been very little investment in certainly the Highlands of Scotland from the UK government in some respects. So this is their opportunity to put some money in.
To make a difference, and actually, make a difference. Stuart Nicol, can I bring you in at this point?
Thanks, Chris, and I would echo Trudy's point. I think what I'm just to take a step back, I'm struggling to see where this fund would sit within the existing framework, and I think we, when we aspire to do what John laid out, we can't do that in isolation from what the Scottish and UK governments have already put in terms of the City Region Deal, and I'm quite happy to call for City Region Deal 2. Have long had the view that City Region Deal 1 was news to most of us, that we didn't know where it was going and where it had come from. So I think the projects could have been better picked, and I think that the money could have been used in a different way that was much more efficient for the wider region. I guess my problem is, if you're talking 10, 20 million, that's a lot of money, but it's not, if you look at the whole of North Highland or even into Argyll, that's not a lot of money per project or per community. So what's the return on that for anybody? Is it measurable when it's spread across such a diverse region as we have? And I think what's the role for Visit Scotland in this? What's the role for Highland Council and for Highland Council have got no money. Well, they've got more money than any other entity in the Highlands. It's what they're choosing to do with it and what the pressures they have got. So there's some real challenges around, I think.
Yeah.
But there must be a strong business case, John, to put together, isn't there, on this?
Yeah, I think so. And I'd like just to probably tie in Trudy and Stuart's on the city region deal. I agree with that, but I also agree with both points here is that, you know, I think the councillors up this neck of the woods, I mean, they have a bit of a standard joke that, you know, that it's a city deal, it's not a city region deal, you know, and they sit, you know, and I think it did catch everyone off guard, and it hasn't achieved maybe what it could have. So yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, is it for the North Highlands in its own right? Is it a city region deal? But then you get into politics thing, and there's a bit of a push that we're losing some councillors at here in Caithness and Sutherland. Is that, you know, is there a push for a city council and a Highland council? So, but that's a different story, I know. But yeah, here, wherever it comes from, if it achieves the goal of knitting it together a bit more and putting in the infrastructure, and, you know, there's one thing I'm really passionate about is that we need to lower the age demographic in the Highlands, and, you know, to keep young people here, or at least give them an opportunity that they can stay and that they don't have to move. If they choose to move, that's different. That's their choice. But I think that we have got lots of things here that we can help create opportunities, and I think a lot of them will be that has a bit more entrepreneurism, and people have to their own business, but that's not easy, you know, that's not easy. But yeah, I don't have all the answers.
No, look, I understand that completely. It's a complicated scenario. So,
yeah.
Stuart, just coming back to you quickly, in your ideal world, what do you like to see happen?
I think we have to maximise the revenues that we've got within the existing public sector, and I don't think it's focused enough. I go back to the challenge that John's just mentioned around politics, but if you're going to get 10 to 20 million from the public sector, there will be inevitably politics involved with that. If you get match funding from the private sector, we understand fully it wants a return. So what are the actual projects that are going to deliver the return that will lead to the investment to match the money that comes in from the public sector? And I would more than welcome a city Highland split for Highland Council, because the view from Inverness is, you will not be surprised that we don't have quite the view that the rest of Highland Council has as to how much the money actually gets usefully spent within the city of Inverness. So and that's where the North Coast 500 ties together all parts of the region so well. And it's, you know, it's quite bluntly an embarrassment that Inverness is the start and finish of the North Coast 500. Not because it shouldn't be as the Highland capital, it should be, but have you seen our infrastructure and our tourism offering lately? It's nowhere near where it should be as a world-class destination.
Yeah, and I think like what David's having to go at too, as he mentions in the article, is the offshore wind farm and wind farm cash as well. So getting some of that money back into providing infrastructure. So I think there's an element of that as well, because there is large amounts of money there that are sometimes fed into communities and different funds, etc. Well, maybe it needs to be a bit more strategic rather than small pockets, I guess. I mean, and the other bit is, I think there's, Stuart and Trudy will know more about this. Is there Crown estate money as well? Is there not Crown, and are they not working out how much of the coast affects to how much each pocket gets?
It's a coastal community fund that is sitting with Highland Council. We've still been trying to find out exactly what they're going to be doing with it, but it looks like it's going to be small communities that can bid into it, but what it's going to be used for is anybody's guess.
Do you know what level of money is involved there, Trudy, at all, in total?
I think it's $1 million, and is it $1.5 million, Stuart? I don't know. It's something like that.
Per year or?
Per year, I think, but
Yeah,
don't
okay.
quote me on that. I'm not certain. Because there's little details that have come out. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And Stuart, you're talking about that obviously Inverness needs investment as well. What kind of level do you think investment does Inverness need itself to get structure up to place?
I don't have figures for that, Chris, but again, we're back to, and I'm presuming nobody from Highland Council's on the call, but we've a challenge with our local authority, and certainly in Inverness, with the Common Good Fund that provides tens of millions a year, and it's administered and it's looked after, but it is not being it's not being effectively used, and it could actually be used to transform the city, and it's not the Highland Council's back pocket fund, and that's the frustration, is that kind of revenues could help transform a city. And I think, you know, looking at the revenues coming in from offshore wind farms, there's a real opportunity here, because the reality is we've got individual communities that are split by wind farms because they're hugely divisive issues as such, and you've got communities who don't know how to spend, they can't spend the fund that they've got enough because they've run out of things to spend the money on. So crossing it up and using it for the wider region, I think, makes a lot of sense. And I think Crown Estates, where that money goes in terms of the Crown and the revenue flows, I think is far too remote from the communities that could really benefit from the fact that these developments are on our doorstep.
Peter, can I bring you in at this point?
Yeah, I was interested to take Stuart say that Inverness is lacking in infrastructure. I think quite a few of the local guys, there's obviously Tony Story's just built out Ness Walk, big 5-star hotel going into the centre of town. I know there's a lot of operators looking forward to the end of the works on the castle, and what opportunities that's going to bring to Inverness. And I guess it's just surprising to hear someone local say there's not much going on. So from an outsider, Stuart, what's your views on the castle works and restoration?
Listen, there's plenty going on in Inverness and across the Highlands, and Tony's development's a fantastic example of that. But we've got major sites within the city that we're not seeing innovative planning and innovative developments coming on. We've had the Riverside site that's been vacant for about 20 years, a prime site on the side of the River Ness, and we still have no development on it. So that there is activity, and Tony's a brilliant example of a private sector-led investment in the city, and he's got further plans for the city centre with the hotel he's going to develop there as in addition to Ness Walk. What I'm talking about is the civic space and the civic infrastructure and how you get to Inverness and from Inverness, and Trudy and I will often reflect that, and you still then to get from Inverness to the north of Scotland, and that in itself is a challenge. Now, nobody is dealing with those basic infrastructure challenges. And, if we consider digital and broadband as part of the key infrastructure that we all need, and we need housing for the whole communities around the whole of Highland Council to support tourism, fish farming, any kind of commercial activity. We're all doing our job as chambers and developing a young workforce and making sure our young people have the option to stay within their region and see tourism as a fantastic career to develop. But these kids can't find houses to live in. So we've got some fundamental challenges that we have to address. It's not that there aren't innovative and fantastic commercial developments going on, but there are some really structural issues in terms of how we do planning and how quickly things need to get done, because they don't get done quickly.
Your thoughts, Peter?
I think that's actually probably a fair cop. I think planning has historically been one of the slowest points, and I don't get involved very much in residential development, so it's something I'd be interested to hear my colleagues up north and what they think about. Certainly the Gap site you've mentioned, Stuart, and those other things. I think Inverness a couple of years ago was voted by, or was made by Colliers one of the top cities in the UK to develop a hotel. I know of 2 or 3 that are, not just Church Street. There's a 210 bed Hampton by Hilton to come. And I know that somebody looked at the Old Royal Mail site by the railway station as a potential hotel as well. I'm not sure that quite got the traction or the return that they were expecting. So yeah, I think Inverness is on people's target list. It's got an airport which it uses very, very well. And I think room rates and people's chat about the city it will produce a good return for beds and therefore for leisure in the city. You're absolutely right. It's getting people out of the city and understanding that to go 30 miles north isn't 20 minutes in the car. It takes a lot longer. And I think that I've driven parts of the North Coast 500, and I think it's how do we improve everything around it, and feed the money out to make sure that it's easier to get everywhere. And that's probably.
But this is, what we're talking about, though, isn't it? Is about infrastructure funding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is building a competitive world-class infrastructure. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And if I could just come in and Peter, you mentioned that the Castle project, and that is a fundamentally important project, not just for the city of Inverness, but for the whole of the Highlands. But it's going to take 4 years to get from where it currently is to a place where it can start to welcome fee-paying tourists to the region. So it's a major project, and it's got backing at the highest level. But I'm concerned that not many of us in the private sector are aware of what the plans are, because it's been driven by Fergus's MP and Highland Council, and very few of us are tied into the thinking and the planning and all of that, or even briefed on what the thinking is.
Jane, you're bringing a point about speed of service.
Yeah, really interesting discussions there. And while I have no comment, obviously, on Highland Council, I'm actually just out of a call with our Chief Executive today, talking about some of the lessons that we can learn from this pandemic that might change how we do business, because we're not going to have the same level of funding going forward to deliver even our most basic services. But one of the big things for me has been around speed of delivery, and councils have not traditionally been known for their speed of implementation or reaction. And that's one thing I think we absolutely have to capture, is that we have been able to move mountains in the past few months, and we have set up and established and run whole new services that didn't previously exist, and we've done that in the space of 2 or 3 days at times. So it shows that when officers who have the experience and confidence are given a clear mandate by the political leaders, they can go and deliver, and that's not always been the case. So certainly that was a conversation we have had this very morning, is how do we take that forward and continue with that, rather than reverting back to traditional ways of doing things. And I would like to think those conversations might be happening in other local authorities too.
Yeah, no, I understand that. John, we're down to the last few minutes, obviously, of this discussion. So it is clear that everyone, I think, agrees there needs to be infrastructure to maximise the opportunity. So the question is, how do we make that argument? How's that argument to be made?
I would like to see, because like Stuart, as he knows, I was kind of, I was aware of that issue of lack of involvement from a chamber maybe in that Castle project, because I sat on Wildlife Highland Board at the time, and I've subsequently left that. But what's ringing here is that we need, and I feel passionate about it anyways, we need more business people, even through chambers and groups and individuals, etc. We need them in the mix to feed into the strategy, because is there a 10-year plan for the Highlands? Is there? I don't know, and if there is, who made it up, and where is it? Because I just think that the decisions are made in the wrong place sometimes, and I think that we right now we've got a chance to rewrite the future. We need to grab that. Fiona Hislop mentioned about having an economic revolution. I worry that the R is going to get dropped, and we're going to slot in an E, and we're going to have an evolution. So we have got a chance here to do something special. Just as Jane said, that things were done, over the past few weeks that we would never have done before. But how do we do that? But I think more business involvement, the better. And in terms of Stuart's 4 years for the castle, what came to mind there? If we were in China, that would be done in 3 months.
It's all going to
make
be
it
that.
so difficult.
It's going to be that funding, though.
Listen, if I remember having a dinner on a Sunday night with an Indian High Commissioner in the King's Mills, and I did the sums in the back of my napkin. If we could build the A9 at the speed that they build infrastructure in India, it would be done in 7.5 days. You know, that tells us something. Yeah. But we're still a long way short in finishing the A9, never mind the Highland Main line or the Far North line.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a question for Stuart and John, if I may. Let's say there's success with the project that I'm working on. Do you think that if the private sector leads the way, the public sector will follow?
Really good point, Peter. I think sadly no. Quite bluntly, I think one of the things we're lacking is visionary leadership across the piece, and I'm hesitating here. I think we've got. This might actually perversely help us. One of the dynamics of the Highland economy is about 2/3 of it is public sector driven. And actually post-COVID, that might be helpful. Thank you very much. While the private sector businesses struggle to find out what way is up if they're going to survive. So that may help us. But that legacy of thinking is one of the challenges we have, that we don't have innovation, we don't have speed of things. It's not that there are not brilliantly good guys at most levels within our public sector organisations, but it's the legacy monoliths that each of these inevitably are.
Agreed.
It's probably right, Peter, isn't it? It's going to be private sector that's got to sort this, isn't it? Private investment.
I think it is. I mean, you know, certainly the guy I'm dealing with has seen the gap, wants to fill it, understands. You know, it'll be a tourist-based thing if it pulls it off, and it will cover the whole of the North Coast 500. So you know, it should hopefully bring a bit of a focal point to that. But then on the back of that investment, and we are talking millions of pounds worth of investment post the transactions, if that all comes off, you know, is that going to be the kickstart to help feed in between? And that's the bit, you know, there's only so much the private sector can do. And, you know, if someone does bring that unity around the 500, I hope it will be the kickstart to help fill the gaps, as it were.
John, final words?
Yeah, well, it'd be nice to think it, but and it'll certainly be the catalyst of something. But yeah, I get a bit disillusioned with the whole political bit. But in terms of, I don't know if you noticed. Well, Stuart and Trudy probably noticed in P&D a few weeks ago. Alistair Carmichael wrote a very good piece on HIE. Or I thought it was a very good piece, and it said that, you know, we really maybe need to look backwards and take it back to a more localized approach within it, and empower the local piece like Highlands and Islands Development Board did. And I think he's hoping to have. So he actually phoned me, and he's hoping to pull together Sir Tom Hunt and a few others, and Chambers will be involved in this, I'm sure, is that to maybe put together a half-day session to look at is there a different way of doing development agency work, etc. Because yeah, I think for me, I think there's work to be done.
There's work to be certainly done. Thank you. Look, thank you, John. Thank you for your comments. To me, it seems like a real opportunity. So it's obviously a great discussion to continue. So I hope we can actually move this forward and continue how we evolve this. But thank you all today for your comments. We have recorded this. We'll be releasing it tomorrow morning. And as I said, it would be great to reconvene maybe and actually see how we can move this conversation forward. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. And have a great day. Thank you.